Nunez to come on up to the stage. There it is, right there. Let's give a hand to our director. He's going to be able to give us a little bit of background, a lot of background about the film, and we've got our Q&A time that we can start. I wanted to just start off this Q&A, which I will soon turn over to the audience. You mentioned that when we were talking earlier, that you have a history in news. So I wanted to know if you could let us know how that background in news got you into making this documentary in particular.
Well, I used to work many moons ago. Well, not that many moons ago, just 7 years ago. Prior, I worked for Bloomberg, I've worked for MSNBC, NBC News, and CNN, and just interviewing people and putting together stories and features and all that. Just honed in my interviewing skills and trying to make people that were never in front of cameras, especially those downwinders, comfortable in telling their stories.
And then throughout the film, you make a point about how this story has come up in news over time. What made it important for you to bring it up now?
Well, one of the, I guess, the bright spots of the pandemic is you have nothing to do but watch YouTube. And, you know, one of the things that just dawned on me is like how I try to frame this movie, and because there's been a lot of myths about the cancers and all that, so I try to be as thorough as I can. And I think the main thing was what I discovered in researching is what goes around comes around. Nothing ever changes. I know we all live through bad times, but believe me, it's always been this way, right? So you know, when, say for example, the issues of streaming now, right, as opposed to going to the movies, they were going through that in 1951 with television. Right, so there was this quest to make big action movies, big spectaculars, right, like the Ten Commandments, The Robe, Spartacus, all those things. Just like now we have Marvel comics, right, Marvel movies and all that. So it's a very similar thing. And then I was looking at, and I was telling you before, you know, Howard Hughes's are like the 1950s version of Elon Musk, right? And, so none of that kind of changes, right? So in putting this story together, I was like trying to put in subtext that kind of all these issues just always kind of rotate and go around, right? And it's always about, you know, people that are culpable trying to step back and blame the other person, kind of. So that's kind of how I framed it. And then The Conqueror is just such a bad movie. You know? And the thing is, I don't even think I do it justice, guys. I mean, I've seen this movie like 20 times, but I've never seen it all the way through, and that's a true story, because it is, you can't watch it. Because it's so bad and it's so inappropriate. But, you know, that's the way it is. I mean, I do suggest, and I don't even think it's available. I had to get a Blu-ray copy from South Korea.
What? That's insane.
And then colorize and grade it and all that. Just
Oh my God. Awesome.
But you can see it
on Amazon.
Yeah, and now it's coming in.
All right, I see a few questions from our audience starting. So can you go ahead and let us know?
So Dugway, which is the military area where they develop chemical and biological weapons in the United States, it's pretty near St. George. I have to look exactly at the map, but it's pretty near. Has the downwinders movement, has that influenced any kind of movement to restrict the activities of Dugway, especially since we are under treaty here in the United States not to create biological and some chemical weapons?
Did everyone catch that?
No.
Did you hear that? I'll let you integrate the question in your answer.
So there's this kind of U.S. chemical testing program near Mount Zion and the Nevada-Utah border, and the gentleman asked if the downwinder movement helped restrict it. I think that's more about politics than the poor downwinders, really. And you know, the downwinders had to, you know, kind of fight long and hard. And the good news is, just 3 days ago, they, at least Congress, got their act together amazingly and did pass in the Senate only. It hasn't gone to the House yet. but an extension of the compensation. But to answer your question, it is limited to just those 12 counties in around northern Arizona, Utah, Nevada, because, you know, let's face it, radiation does spread, and that's kind of the thing. When the Chernobyl incident happened, you know, people in Scotland were getting sick. That the US government just limits to that radius, that area, needs to be addressed, I think. And also second generation cancers, because since then it has been kind of, not proven, but it's very well known that, or accepted, that cancers can be genetically transferred right to your children. And hopefully I laid out kind of the case of how that could happen, so that poor Bethany, who passed away, you know, and that poor mother who's become a big activist towards it, can happen. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think the downwinders just, you know, are trying to just be recognized and just get their due, because the testing program in the United States, 928 tests. Think about it, 928 tests. What did they not know in test number 5 about atomic weapons at 930? And not only that, here's a good trivia question, is that they had actually started farming out other countries' atomic testing things in Nevada. So the UK is the only other country to explode a nuclear weapon on American soil. So there you go.
Yes, right here.
I guess just which came first for you as far as inspiration? Was it the Downwinders or was it the Conqueror? And then how did you kind of bridge the story together?
So the question is, what was the inspiration, the movie or the Downwinders, and how did you get those stories together?
Well, that was the hardest part, but the Conqueror was the first thing that came to mind. I knew that kind of urban myth, as it were, about the Conqueror. Did John Wayne and Susan Hayward and Dick Powell and all them died because they filmed there. And the more I then started talking to the Downwinders, the more I wanted to make sure that their voices are heard. So the hardest thing to do is trying to tie those two threads together or go back and forth so that people can just get an understanding of what it was like at that time with atomic testing and the patriotism of it all, right? And about how we must win, we must beat the Russians. And Stalin, as Wayne himself even said in the early 70s, that, Stalin was mad enough to explode it. And again, that goes back to my thread about how things just keep revolving. But The Conqueror was such a bad movie that I just think, like Michael Medved said, or John William Law, I'm sorry, that it just did create a movement. It did at least bring awareness to those people. And it was really the People magazine story that was second, and speaking to Mark Sennett, and how it tied to the Downwinders, because he went to Utah, to St. George, just to do a story on one of the Downwinders and found out about the Conqueror, or else it would have been totally kind of forgotten about and not discussed.
Thank you. Yes, right here in the middle, yeah. Oh, and then
Is all the testing definitely stopped?
is all the testing with you?
Yeah, so in a rare form of bipartisanship these days, or 30 years ago, George H.W. Bush did sign a moratorium, and then Clinton enacted it in 93 and 94. So there's been no testing in the United States, though there has been attempts in the last 15 years to try to resume them, right, as other countries get a nuclear bomb, right, like Pakistan, North Korea, etc. So we just have to be vigilant and just hope that it never happens. I mean, they went underground after 1962, so all those above ground tests that happened in Utah, it went underground, but still the force of those explosions is still emanating, radiation up in the ground. It's, to me, what also served as an example was, those firefighters in 9/11 that have all now gotten sick, right? Because it's the same thing. When you just go to a place of pure intensity, illnesses could happen.
And then I saw somebody in the back. Are you? Who is it? Sorry. There you are. Okay, right in front of the board. Yeah.
how dangerous is the set of the Conqueror and St. George today compared to back then?
There you go. What's the danger in St. George and the set of the Conqueror?
So, St. George is now one of the fastest growing communities in the country. A lot of people are moving there because they're getting priced out of Las Vegas, right? Because of the housing thing. And it's only 90 minutes away. Well, 90 minutes for me if I go 80 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour. But it is like, which you can, but it's, you know, it's, so a lot of people are moving there, but a lot of people are retiring there. So right now, I mean, for example, like 10 years ago, I don't think it was going to be that, it's not that dangerous, but now that they're building a lot of homes, that dirt is getting dug up, right? And, you know, who knows? We're not going to know the answer to that for like 10, 15 years because in the movie, you see, it started with sheep, right? So the sheep were the first to get sick from the testing, and then the government was like, oh no, it wasn't the sheep, don't worry about it. It's you guys, right? You're horrible farmers. And then the children started getting sick, and you know, back then, southern Utah, that St. George, I mean, that was a pretty agrarian area, so it was very much clean air. For them to have high incidence of cancer was above normal.
And then, yeah, so their hands over here. Yes, yes.
I just was curious as to whether there was any historical accuracy in the Conqueror.
Any historical accuracy in
Not the casting. I think, no. One thing, if you ever see the movie, you'll see that they just go around. For a guy who conquered all of Asia and bits of Eastern Europe, he didn't conquer much. He just conquered a little bit of a park, you know, national park. You know, there is one scene that's very funny where they run and they have a battle and they go this way and they end up at the exactly same spot where they started. And it's actually very funny, yeah.
really selling this, I'm telling you. Yes, and then right over here, then we got, yes.
Yeah, I gotta say. The subject matter of this film deals with stuff that is unbelievably depressing and important, and also stuff that's really funny. As a filmmaker dealing with these important issues, how do you find the balance with the message you're trying to convey between these two wildly different tones?
Right, how do you work the comedy into the seriousness of this film?
Well, I thought long and hard about it. I just couldn't make it a dirge. That's why I even put two little music interludes there, because I just couldn't have a funeral march going for the next hour. I'm not Stanley Kubrick and Barry Lyndon or something like that, where you just have that music going for like an hour of pure depression. But I mean, I think, you know, what is there to do but laugh, really? Just about the way those tests and, you know, our patriotism gets kind of taken advantage of in a way, and it's kind of similar to now, right? So, you know, it was it wasn't easy, but it took a lot of tinkering, so don't ask me if I'll ever do one of these again.
Will you do one of these again?
Yes, and I've seen your hand, thank you.
This might be an irrelevant question now with that question, but do you have any advocacy for the audience, you know, who want to help the second and third generation downwinders? Is there something that people can do, whether it's political action or calling their Congress people, or to actually get them included in the settlement?
What are the actions we as audiences can do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. I wish Mary Dixon was here, because she was just in Washington 2 days ago, and I spoke to her that I was coming here. She's there lobbying all the time, so if you can, you know, calling your congresspersons would be great, and especially California and, you know, Nevada and Utah and Arizona and New Mexico. I mean, they're the ones mostly affected, but also, in a weird way, the eastern coast as well, because there's a reason why the weather, they call it westerly winds. The major mistake they made is originally the Atomic Energy Commission wanted to make it in North Carolina, in Cape Hatteras, and it would have just gone out to the ocean. But the people of North Carolina said, get the hell out of here, you're out of your minds. So they moved it over to Nevada, which was 5 hours from Los Alamos. So they were smart, they can hightail it out of there. So they did know, you know, they did know, for example, like when the winds would blow towards Los Angeles or Las Vegas, they'd call off the tests. So they were checking the weather constantly, and when it blew the other way, then they'd conduct it. So I think, you know, Congress people from the Midwestern states, this has affected all of them, and we don't know, and we probably never will know how our cancer rates have increased, right? Because cancers did start increasing in the 50s and 60s, you know, besides plastics and smoking and all those other issues. But, you know, 928 tests that just go into our atmosphere. There's no force shield that just stopped at, like, you know, Interstate 15 right off St. George. You know, that thing kept traveling. And it's traveled all over North America. So that was the one thing I learned. There's an organization called Heal Utah, which gives a great educational bit, and there's a Downwinders website as well for you to learn some more about their stories, more importantly, and hopefully through their stories, you know, Congress will act. And this is one of the weird things. Usually you go to Congress, go nowhere, and then you go to the courts for relief. This was actually the opposite. In the 90s, they would go to the courts, and the courts were saying, well, it's national security, it's for the good of the country, you're out of luck. And finally, the question is, did John Wayne, in one strange bit of action coming to the rescue, bring that attention to light? And then that's what spurred them on. But it still took 12 years and more testing to do.
Well, let's give, we can continue the Q&A in the lobby, but we are going to clear the theater for the next film. We wanted to give one last...
Oh, thank you so much for coming. I should have said that in the beginning. Thank you so much.
William Nunez, thank you so much for coming to Cinequest. All right, we'll see you guys out in the lobby.